U.S. President Donald Trump has announced plans to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Hungary for a new round of direct talks aimed at finding a path toward ending the ongoing war in Ukraine. The meeting, expected to take place within the coming weeks, marks what Trump described as a critical step in the pursuit of peace after months of diplomatic stagnation. According to the White House, the Hungarian capital Budapest was chosen as the venue because of its neutral stance and long-standing ties with both Washington and Moscow. President Trump, speaking briefly to reporters outside the White House, said the meeting would focus on bringing an end to the bloodshed and creating a framework for long-term stability in Eastern Europe. "We had a very good, very productive conversation," Trump said, referring to a recent phone call with Putin. "Both sides want peace, and we think Hungary will be a great place to continue the dialogue." Observers see this upcoming summit as one of the most significant diplomatic engagements between the United States and Russia since the start of the conflict. It is expected to cover a wide range of issues, including the potential for a ceasefire, the role of NATO in regional security, and the reconstruction of Ukrainian territories affected by the war. While no exact date has been set, officials from both sides have begun preliminary coordination for logistics and security. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, a close ally of both leaders, is reportedly facilitating the arrangements and is expected to attend parts of the discussions. Analysts suggest that the meeting could serve as a turning point, either opening the door for meaningful peace negotiations or exposing the deep divisions that continue to define the conflict. The planned summit in Hungary follows what both Washington and Moscow described as a positive and productive phone conversation between President Donald Trump and President Vladimir Putin earlier this week. The call, which reportedly lasted more than an hour, touched on several key issues related to the war in Ukraine, including possible ceasefire terms, humanitarian access, and the future political status of contested regions. According to a statement released by the White House, President Trump emphasized the need for real progress on the ground and called for immediate steps to reduce violence and protect civilian lives. He also reiterated America's willingness to work with Russia on a diplomatic settlement that respects Ukraine's sovereignty while addressing legitimate security concerns raised by Moscow. The Kremlin, in its own readout, said the two leaders discussed practical measures to de-escalate tensions and agreed that direct communication between Washington and Moscow was essential for stability in Europe. Russian officials described the tone of the conversation as constructive, noting that both sides avoided the confrontational rhetoric that has often characterized U.S.-Russia relations in recent years. Putin's special envoy Kirill Dmitriev called the exchange a genuine effort to bridge differences and explore realistic solutions. Diplomatic observers suggest that the phone call marks a notable shift toward engagement after months of hardened positions. While skepticism remains high among U.S. allies in Europe, the dialogue has been welcomed by countries advocating for negotiation over escalation. Trump administration officials said the leaders agreed to maintain open lines of communication ahead of their meeting in Budapest. The discussion has renewed cautious optimism that a diplomatic breakthrough, however modest, could emerge if both sides continue to engage in good faith. Following the leaders' phone call, President Donald Trump announced that both nations would move swiftly to organize high-level discussions between their top advisors. These preparatory talks are set to take place next week, led on the U.S. side by Secretary of State Marco Rubio and involving senior figures from the Departments of Defense and Treasury. On the Russian side, the delegation will include Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and Putin's special envoy Kirill Dmitriev, who described the upcoming meetings as a necessary step toward lasting peace. According to administration officials, the talks will focus on shaping a potential framework agreement to present at the Trump-Putin summit in Budapest. Key agenda items include mechanisms for a verified ceasefire, security guarantees for both Ukraine and Russia, and economic measures aimed at stabilizing war-affected regions. The United States is also expected to push for greater humanitarian access to civilian populations and the release of prisoners of war. Reactions to Trump's announcement have been mixed. Some lawmakers in Washington welcomed the move as a pragmatic effort to end a costly conflict, while others expressed skepticism about negotiating directly with Moscow without stronger commitments from NATO partners. European leaders, including those from Germany and France, have cautiously supported renewed diplomacy but warned against any agreement that undermines Ukraine's independence. In Moscow, Russian state media portrayed the developments as a diplomatic victory for Putin, highlighting Washington's willingness to engage on equal terms. Meanwhile, in Kyiv, Ukrainian officials said they were seeking assurances that their nation's sovereignty would not be compromised in the process. Despite uncertainties, analysts note that the decision to initiate advisor-level talks represents a tentative but important opening. One that could either pave the way for meaningful peace negotiations or expose the limits of current diplomacy.